Hey guys, if you're struggling to make smooth chord changes, we're going to fix that today with two simple exercises. One of the biggest issues I see is that students start to learn a chord, so they'll learn like a G chord and an E minor chord, and they'll try to add strumming right away, and they'll end up sounding kind of like this when they strum. And there's this pause where they have to wait to get their fingers in place for the chord change. And it's really difficult for them to sort of start to mend this together. And I've devised a system that really, it just solves this issue completely, but it takes a little bit of time. And the trick here is that we need to isolate the left and the right hand from each other. So we're going to isolate the strumming hand from the fretting hand. And basically what we're going to do is put the strumming hand completely on hold until the left hand is ready. Now, the analogy that I like to use to my students is like this. Imagine a band came together and they wanted to play something, but they never practiced together. And they come together, they try to play a song, and you got somebody in the front conducting it, and everything just falls apart because nobody knows their parts. Well, that's the way I look at the fretting hand and the strumming hand. I look at the fretting hand as the band members. So I tell my students, these four fingers on our fretting hand are the band members, and they have specific roles and positions they need to be in order for a chord to sound right. And then the strumming hand is the conductor. The conductor is the one that tells the fretting hand or the band members what they need to play and when they need to play. So you can pick different strings and stuff like that. But anyway, what happens is if your band members are not ready, then the conductor can't do anything. So what we're going to do first, step one, is going to be to get our band members in order. Get them to learn what they need to learn. The easiest way we can do this is to start with a simple 4-chord progression. We're going to use the chords G, E minor, C, and D for this lesson. But you could technically use any chords. Doesn't matter if they're power chords, bar chords, whatever. This exercise is going to work. So we got these 4 chords, G, E minor, C, and D. The way that we're going to work on this is we need to isolate these 4 chords into sets of 2. So we're going to look at G and E minor as set 1, E minor to C as set 2, C to D as set 3, and then D to G as set 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to work on each of these sets isolated. So we're going to take G and E minor first. And the thing that's cool about G and E minor is if you play a G chord and then you follow it by E minor, they share an anchor finger. So I like to get my students to play the E minor with fingers 1 and 2, like this. Although you can play it like this, you can do like the rock and roll thing for E minor. A lot of times when you're beginning, it's easier to use fingers 1 and 2, and you can play that chord just like that. And then when you go to the G chord, you can share this anchor finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. So you can start to practice this change in this way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try to get 86 changes in 2 minutes. And we're going to go through a little process to get here. But what I find is if you can do 86 changes in 2 minutes, then you're doing just a little bit over 1 second per chord. And it makes your strumming start to synchronize way faster when you can do this. But the way we're going to practice this is at first, we're not going to time anything. We're just going to do sets of 100 between G and E minor. So what that means is I would take a G chord and I would play it once. 1 and switch to E minor. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. And I would continue to do this until I get to 100, and that would be my first set. Now, what's going to happen when you do this is maybe your hand gets a little bit tired, but you got to push yourself through until you get 100 changes, however long that takes you. If it takes you 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, you have to get through that. And you're going to do that maybe at least 5 to 7 times a day. So you could just pick up your guitar, sit down, and then just go G and E minor until you get to 100. You just count every single chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to do that for maybe 1 or 2 days just on that change, just G and E minor. Say on like day 3 or day 4, you're starting to get faster with it. you can add the timer, and you would put on a 2-minute timer, and then you would count up and you would see how many can I do in 2 minutes. And you just count every single chord as that timer goes down. And if you can get at least 86, that's going to be our benchmark, then your hand is going to be ready for making the change in the context of a strum. Okay, so the biggest issue that happens is, you know, students start strumming, they get ready for that change, and then they have to pause. If we do this, these sets of 86 in 2 minutes, then we know our left hand is ready for that change. And we can start to make this change really smooth. And I'm going to come back to the strum in a second, and we'll explain kind of how we start getting into that transition. But that's going to be your first step, is take G and E minor, practice in sets of 100. When you start feeling comfortable with it, add the timer, try to get 86 in 2 minutes. You have to stick to this. You have to make this happen. This usually can take a student maybe a week, 2 weeks, something like that, but you have to gauge yourself and see how good or bad you're doing with this. And the one thing I want to tell you is don't count buzzing chords, right? So if the chord's not clean, don't count it. So if you go, that's not 1, that's not 2. No, it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can go as slow as you need to at first. The goal at first is just to do sets of 100, okay? Now, say you get G and E minor pretty quick, you're going to move to the next set. You could do this in any order. You could do G to E minor to C, C to D, D to G, whatever you want to do. They're all going to be tricky at first. But let's say we do C now, or sorry, E minor and C. We do the same exercise, E minor to C, E minor to C. If you do E minor to C, you're going to try to use the middle finger as the anchor from the E minor to the C. E minor to C. And I would just do that 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth until I get up to 100. And then once I start getting comfortable with that, I'm going to switch and start doing C to D. This is a tricky one. This one may take you a little bit longer than all the other chords that you've done, because all the fingers need to switch for this chord. Right? So all your fingers are switching position. Same thing with D to G. D to G, everything's going to switch. There's no anchor fingers on these ones. But you're going to do the same process. You're going to do sets of 100. And like I said, you gauge yourself. If you want to do G and E minor and C, if you want to practice all of them in the same day, you can do that, but just make sure you're doing sets of 100. Now, a little side note here is that when you start timing yourself and you put this 2-minute timer on, whatever you end up with, that becomes your goal to beat. So say you put a timer on for 2 minutes and you go through this and you only get 40 clean ones. You only get up to 40. That 40 now becomes your new goal to beat. So the next time you run it, you're going to try to get 46, 48, 50, right? And you're going to keep trying to beat these goals that you set for yourself. Another tip here would be to always incorporate one of the chords that you already just did. So if I did G and E minor, I would want to do another chord but use one of these two as the transition chord. So I could either do E minor to C, E minor to D, right? That would help me start eliminating those chords. Or I could do G to D or G to C. So I want to make sure that I'm always using a chord that I've already eliminated on the timer thing. That way I'm not constantly learning always new chords. I'm going to always reuse one of my old ones. It really helps out. Focus on accuracy first, not speed. Speed's going to come after accuracy happens. Now let's say we got all the chords up to where we're doing 86 in 2 minutes. So we're doing 86 between G and E minor to C, C to D, and D to G. We got all them at 86. That means technically we know we can make the change fast enough within the context of a strum. First, I'm going to play the strum pattern. It's going to be the California Sunrise strum pattern. If you didn't see my video last week, check it out. I'll put it in the description below, and that goes over what I call the California Sunrise strum. And essentially, it's just down, down, up, up, down, up. It sounds like this. So we're going to use that strum pattern. The trick to making smooth chord changes is that on that last up, that's when I start to open my fingers to make the chord transition. Now when I do this, what that does is it allows me time to make the change and I don't get stuck with my fingers being pressed on the fretboard. And it makes them sound so much smoother and cohesive because what you're doing is you're giving yourself a little bit of time to start that transition with the fretting hand. So your band members on your hand can get into place for that next chord. And the important thing about this is that when a student starts to add the strum pattern, there's usually a pause that happens where they go, right? And there's this like hang up where when they're trying to make the transition, there's this issue in like they're waiting for their left hand to get there. And what you have to do is sort of get over this mental block where if you're doing 86 changes in 2 minutes, then your fingers can move fast enough to make that change. So what you have to do is sort of push through that little hiccup that you're going to have. And I always tell my students, it's like the rhythm is more important than the notes you play at this point, meaning that like if I screw up the chord a little bit, so what? I'm going to keep strumming through it and try to keep this right hand or the conductor to just keep strumming. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you an example where I just butcher the chords, but I keep the strum going. And listen to how that sounds. And I'll do it twice on each chord. Right? So what happens is if I kind of push myself through that strum, it still sounds okay to the listener. And when you're starting out with getting the strum and getting the left and right hand together, it's okay. It's not like you're performing in front of a million people. So you can work through this. It'll get cleaner over time. You kind of have to just force yourself to push through and keep that right hand going. Now the other thing is when you make this transition with the left hand or with your fretting hand, what has to happen is on the last up, you're going to open your hand for the transition. So my fingers are going to kind of lift off. If I have an anchor finger, the anchor finger will stay down, but the other fingers will lift off for the transition. And it'll look like this. So I'll do the strum pattern just once so you can see where I'm opening up on the last up. So it's like down, down, up, down, transition, down, down, up, down. A little quicker. And you can sort of hear where those notes open up. Now when you start doing this, you're going to try to probably do the strum pattern twice before you make the change. That way it just gives you mentally more time to think about and anticipate the change that's going to happen. So when you practice it, I would suggest you do it like this. Okay, so twice. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that this little like transition on the last up, it's not a cheat. This is how you do it. This is the way you do it. Doesn't matter. Even if I'm playing like a bar chord or something, which you don't have to try to do this, but you'll hear there's going to be like a little mute. It ends up being like a mute when you play bar chords. It sounds like this. But when you do the open strings, it sounds kind of like... So if you work on this, I promise you, you're going to get these changes super smooth. You're going to, it's not going to happen immediately. It might take you a week, might take you 2 weeks. On average, it usually takes a student somewhere between 2 and 3 months or 60 to 90 days to really start getting the changes smooth to where they feel like they can actually like strum through a whole song or something like that. But either way, whatever time it takes you, you got to get through it. Some people just take way too long to get through this. I meet people, they've been playing for a year and they still can't strum and change between chords. You can eliminate this super quick and early on. It's one of the best things you can do for yourself. You're going to feel great if you do it. Hey guys, thank you for watching. I know this video is going to help you with your strumming. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to this channel. Also check out my guitar flashcards on Amazon. It's called the Fretboard Memorization Deck. And also at tunedinguitarcourses.com, I have a course that covers all the content of the flashcards. So if you're getting into like music theory and memorizing formulas and all that kind of stuff, that is the place for you guys to go. Anyway, I will catch you on the next video. God bless.